Hi there, it's Jan here from JB Crafts, and I'm back today with another tutorial for you. So I've got a really pretty design today, and this comes under the concept cards again. So I'm going to actually show you how to make a double Z fold card today. So I've done my decoration with some papers from the Wild at Heart collection from Crafter's Companion, which I'll show you in a second. And then I've got a set of Hunky Dory stamps that's just got this beautiful selection of dancing characters. So yeah, we're going to show you how to put this together. It opens out, there's a little bit more decoration inside, and it gets its double Z from the fact that there are two pieces here that form that Z shape. So I'm going to show you how I've popped this together. I've actually, on my sample, I've popped my greeting, as I often do, on the back of my card so that I can make the most of decorating and enjoying the inside part. So I can write my message here to the recipient and just linked it in with what I've done on the other side. So yeah, we're going to do a little bit of stamping. I've actually embossed the black on here, so I don't know if you can just pick up the, it's got a lovely shiny finish on here, which we're going to do today, just with some clear embossing powder over a black ink. And this one's actually for a special little girl on her 8th birthday. So let's get into the tutorial. I'll pop this to one side. I've got the dimensions for you, and I'll show you the products as we go along through the tutorial. So just pop that one to one side. And I've actually deconstructed my card because it was longer than a piece of A4, and I wanted to use craft card, which only comes, well, I only have in A4 size. So I've got two pieces of cardstock, and I'm going to stick it together, which is what I mean by deconstructed. So once you get the idea of this, it's fairly straightforward. So the first piece is the width of A4 here in the UK. I've got that full 8 1/4 width, and 5 1/2 is the height of my card. And then I've just scored along this left hand side at 1/2 inch. Okay, so we've just got 7 3/4 finished size by 5 1/2. So this is going to be a glue tab, and then what I've done is I've created a second piece, and this one is 7 1/2 by 5 1/2, and I've scored it straight down the center here at 3 3/4, and I've just given that a little bit of a burnish. These edges should meet here. Just reinforce that fold line because I've had them laid flat while I was preparing all this. And the same with my little glue tab here. We'll just reinforce that score line. Now I've actually folded these so that I've got the darker side of the craft card. I often get asked which is the right side. And if you have a look, there is a difference between one side and the other, and I don't think there is a right answer to that. Both sides are equally usable, and I think it just goes down to personal preference, but I do like that richer tone on show. Now normally if we'd have created a normal fold card, that light colour would be inside, but this time I've made sure that the way I've folded this is I've kept that darker side visible so that we can see it on the front of the card. I'm not too worried about this showing on the back with the message because that is the reverse of the card. So you want to make sure that we've created a little valley fold on this end, and all that means is that your score line's trapped inside and we're folding this back on itself, and this is going to create the tab to fit on here. So what I've done is folded this in half, and you want your folded side to the middle. So I've actually just put a little cross on mine here just to remind me that that's the piece that I'm going to stick onto my tab here. And this is going to create, once this is stuck together, this is going to create that first part of the Z. So let's do that first. I'm going to use a little bit of wet glue just so that I can get that maximum movement ready to stick it together. So I've got a little bit of the all-purpose glue there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the outside edge here with my fold on the score line, like so. And just make sure that that's nice and, oops, try that again, Jan. It wants to be nice and flush on that edge, and make sure that it runs parallel all the way down here. Okay. And then I'm just going to give that a little bit of a press to secure it, and then we've got our fold back element there to create our original Z fold. Okay, so that's step number one. And just make sure that that's now firmly in place, like so. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in some matte layers before we do the second Z fold. So I'm going to decorate this part of it to a certain extent before we move on to that second piece in the cream. So again, my paper pad was this one that I've used, and this is from a Sarah signature collection called Wild at Heart. Absolutely stunning. The papers in here are just absolutely beautiful. So you've got those really bold animal prints, and then you've got the florals in there with it as well. So I've done my original sample was in sort of that cheetah print. I've used this one. So it's got that lovely cheetah print with the pink floral on the front. And then for this one, I'm actually going to use, where did we land? Let's have a look. I've gone for one of the zebra prints this time. Further back. This one. Okay, so we've got that lovely zebra print on one side, and you've got the florals introduced. And I'm going to do a mix and match of both of the papers. So I've cut these down to size, and I'll go through all the measurements with you. There is quite a few measurements for this particular one, but we'll do them one at a time. So the first piece I've cut is going to sit right in the back of here, and I haven't actually done a matte layer for this because a lot of this is going to be covered up. I am just going to pop that in the back there, and this one measures 7 1/4 by 5 1/4. Okay, now I'm just looking, that's come up a little bit short here. I think it should have been 7 1/2. Looking at that, let me just measure the one in the sample. I think I've cut that a little bit short, but I'm not too worried because it's going to go into the side of the card. 7 1/4. So what have I done differently there? Let's have a look. That is 7 1/2. Let me just double check. Is it this piece that's longer? Yeah, that bit is. Right, let's just rectify that. So my finished card is actually, it should be 7 1/2 by 5 1/2. 7 1/2 by 5 1/2. So let me just bring this in, and what we will do is just trim that edge. I thought something looked a little bit off there, so this wants to finish at 7 1/2. I've got an extra 1/4 of an inch for some reason, which we can easily rectify on there. Get rid of that bit. That's better. Yep. And then that fits in nicely in there. Yeah, at 7 1/4 by 5 1/4. So I've just gone down 1/4 of an inch. We'll get rid of that bit. I'm going to stay with that all-purpose glue, and I'm going to have the main part of that zebra print showing on the back here, because we're going to cover up quite a significant portion of this with the next layer. But I just wanted to get these pieces down so that we could see this back finished. So we'll lay that one down, wriggle it into place, and that one's just going to stick as a focal point at the back. I'm also going to put a piece on here, but I'm actually going to use the reverse of it with the florals on this time. So we're actually going to pop this, and again, I haven't matted this. This is just the paper for that background, and this one measures 5 1/4 tall again by 3 1/2 inches. So we'll get rid of that piece. We'll stick with that same all-purpose glue. And as I say, I've just mixed and matched whether I've used just the plain animal print or whether we've introduced some of that floral aspect as well, just to give it a little bit of interest. So that one's going to stick on there. Just make sure it's lined up nicely with that one. And then on the front section, I've just got a thin strip. And again, I've gone back to the main animal print for this one. Now, it's actually 5 1/4 tall, the same, but just 1 1/4 inches. And I just want to have a piece of that on here to peek out from the piece of the panel that we're going to put for the second Z fold. So 5 1/4 by 1 1/4. And again, I'm going to put this one on with that main animal print. So we've got a combination of both sides. Now, if you don't have a double-sided paper, you could actually use 2 different papers that coordinate. usually if you take your papers from the same paper pad, you should be able to mix and match any of them together. They're normally designed that all the colours will work together. So that's my background. Now you could actually stop at this level and just have that fold back. You could add a focal point here. You could put a smaller piece in here for your written sentiment or greeting. And you could actually just stop at this part at that 7.5 by 5.5 size. But what I want to do now is bring in that second Z fold. So we've created the back panel that you can see here. I now want to bring in the elements to create this second one with the cream cardstock. And I went for the cream because the white, I got white out first. It was a little bit harsh against this craft card, so I've actually gone for cream. So I'm just going to pop this one to one side. And again, this is deconstructed. I've just made it in exactly the same way. So I've taken my cream cardstock and I am just going to check that I've got the right measurements this time. Yes, 6 3/4 by 4 1/4. And I've actually scored it again at 1/2 inch, and that's just going to fold over as normal this time. So I've actually made a mountain fold on this end this time. Okay, that's going to be the front section that fits across here, and then I need to make the return. So the return section is going to be a piece of 6 1/4 by 4 1/4. So all I've done is taken away that 1/2 inch tab. So this is the same size as the front here. I've just taken away that 1/2 inch that we had for the glue tab. And again, scored that straight down the centre at 3 1/8. And we've got that nice little section here that's going to create our return. And again, I've just popped myself across here. So I've got the fold on the left hand side, opening like a book, and I'm going to stick this part to my glue tab. So we'll carry on with that same glue and just add a little bit of that down that glue tab that we've created. And then I'm going to pop this one again and just line it up. So again, that we've got a nice flush edge on this side here. Just make sure that it all runs nice and parallel when it's opened out. Yep. And if you do have any little tiny bits that are hanging over, you can always trim those with the scissors. Okay, so that's our piece now. You can see we've got that second Z now. So this will actually sit on the top of here, like so. And you've got that double Z when it all opens out. So again, I've got some matte layers to pop on here. We're going to do a little bit of decoration on here, and then we're going to do some stamping and embossing for our main focal area. I've just got a little bit of glue seeping out of there. And if you do get any extra glue, if you've got one of the glue erasers, these come in handy just to get rid of it off that panel. There we go, so that it's not sticky. Now again, I've just popped across on here because my first piece, this is going to sit like so. We're going to do some work to go on the front. We're going to do some stamping work for here. Now you could make this a plain panel and again pop your greeting on there. But I've actually gone for the pattern piece again here. So I've got a piece that is 4 inches by 2 7/8. I've just added a little bit of embellishment with the pink stars on there because I use those on the stamp. And again, I've gone for that sort of pattern side here with the floral element. Just a complete mix and match. There's not really any significance to where the flowers appear and where they don't. I've just used the more plain side on the areas that are going to be covered up more. This side's going to be seen when you open the card. So I thought we'd have a look at that little floral print on there. Okay, so the next panel I've actually done a little bit of matting and layering on this one. This is actually going to stick. And again, there's lots of different ways of doing this. I wanted another matte layer to let this piece stand out. So I've got the brown in the background. You could work straight onto this panel if you wish. Now the reason I didn't is that my cream cardstock's not as heavy as some of my other cardstock, and I do prefer it to be a little bit more substantial, which is why I'm going to add the extra layers. Normally when I'm making card blanks I work with a 300 GSM. I think this one's about 220, so it's a little bit thinner than normal cardstock, which is why I'm going to build up those layers and just give it some substance. So what I've done is I've created a brown panel at 6x4, and this is just a piece of brown textured cardstock from my stash. The patterned layer, I've only come down 1/8 of an inch. I just wanted a tiny little border of the brown showing, and it's 5 7/8 by 3 7/8. And then the decorative strip is 1.5 inches wide by the same height as your piece of matte layer at 3 7/8. So brown layer at 6x4, matte layer at 5 7/8 by 3 7/8, and the paper patterned strip at 1.5 by 3 7/8. So you can see there we've got the perfect layer now, again with those slightly staggered borders. So I've got a 1/4 of an inch and 1/8 of an inch border, and then we're going to do some work to go on top. So I'm going to pop this one on and get all these ready, and these can be drying while we do our stamping and embossing. And again, I've created a second layer to go on top of here. Now it is feasible that you could do your stamping straight onto this part here, but for the reasons I've just given you, I've created an extra piece to sit on top of it. Okay, so just make sure that's straight. I've got a little bit popping out at the bottom there, which should just wipe away. And then we'll just make sure, I'm going to pop my block on that one and just keep that nice and flat while we move on to the next part. So what we're going to do next then is a little bit of stamping. So let me just put my ruler to one side, and I've brought 2 pieces in to work with to stamp on. I'm going to stamp and emboss on one of them and just stamp on the second one. And these are actually going to be the pieces that fit here. So we're going to do that lovely stamping and embossing on this one. And then I've also got a decorative piece that I've added inside here as well. Okay, so the first one, just pop those back to one side. This piece is 4 1/8 by 3 3/4. And this is what we're going to do our heat embossing on. And then the smaller one is 4 1/8 by 3. So these are just cut 1/8 of an inch smaller than the space that I'm actually going to work on. So we'll pop that one to one side for a second, and we're going to bring this one in. So this is going to be the one that I stamp and emboss with. So my stamp set, this is a really, really old one. It's actually For the Love of Stamps by Hunky Dory. I've had this for a very long time. I bought this when I was working for Crafters Companion at their store in Derbyshire. So yeah, it is quite a few years old, but I just love all these little ballerinas on here. And again, I've used the sentiment "Dance like nobody is watching." We've used "On Your Special Day," and I have used some of those stars to help decorate. So let's bring in the stamping platform. Okay, and I'm just going to anchor this in the corner like so. So someone asked the other day as well what I was using in the back of here, and this is just a bit of inexpensive fun foam. It's what you buy in the children's section at I get it from my local one of my local craft stores, and it's very inexpensive, but I just find it gives me that little bit of, you know, when you're depressed, you've got that little tiny bit of give when you're stamping. And then I always just keep a piece of scrap in there in case I overstamp. You can see here where it's just caught the ink, rather than making a mess on the foam. So we'll just make sure that all of those are tucked into the corner like so. And I want to make sure that that 4 1/8 in this instance, let me just double check that, is the width. Yeah, so it's slightly wider than it is tall, so I need to make sure I've got that in my stamping platform the right way. So we're going to pop the magnets on there to hold it in place, and then I'm going to take my stamp set, and I think we had this one here. So we're going to position her. I'm going to take my sentiment as well, because that's going to anchor where the other dancer goes. I want this one up in the corner here like so. So just make sure that's reasonably straight. And again, if you're worried about that, if you've got access to a T-square ruler, or sometimes I just use my set square there, and I can literally line that up with my set square and just make sure that all that writing, and I'm just looking at this bottom line here, is nice and straight. Pick that one up, and that's done its job now. So we can now position. In fact, I'm going to stamp that one so that I know where that's going to sit. Let me just get my other ballerina out, which was this one as well. Okay, so we'll get those at the ready. I'm going to do one of these stamps first of all, and I'm going to use my VersaFine Clair. This is actually a pigment ink, so it stays wet for a bit longer, and it will allow us to put our embossing powder on. I'm also going to get this at the ready. This is my clear embossing powder, which I've got in a tub that is well loved. It wants replacing, to be honest, and I do keep a spoon in there just to spoon it on. So we'll get that at the ready too. Let's pop that one on there. Make sure I've got all my pieces at the ready. And then what I'm going to do is try not to knock the embossing powder over. We will just give this one press for now so that I know whereabouts that is going to sit, just with the little stamp press. And I will put a second coat on that in a minute, but then I can position my dancers now. So I'm going to put one of them slightly higher up, but making sure that she's upright like so. And then this one I'm going to have a little bit further down, as if she's sort of just underneath there like so. I think that's okay. I'm happy with that. Pick those two up. And if for any reason the paper does move, that's why I like to work in the corner here, because now I know that I'm in exactly the right place. So we're going to go back to the ink. We are going to ink up these silhouettes, give them a real nice good coating. I'm going to go over my sentiment again and give that a press into position with my little stamp press there. Okay, so we've got a really nice finish there, but I am going to just go over the dancers one more time. I always think once is good, but twice is better. And then this will hold the powder. Now, because it's clear powder, I didn't actually use my anti-static pad on here, because the clear powder doesn't really show up if you get any speckles elsewhere. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to hover this over here, and you'll see that it goes quite opaque when we get the embossing powder over the top of it. So I usually put plenty on, give it a second to adhere, and then just tap off any excess. And you can see how it's gone sort of quite frosty. Now I've got a little tiny bit, I can just see there's a bit there that wants to brush away. That's fine. So we'll pop that to one side. I will tidy my stamps up in a second, and then I'm going to bring in my heat tool, which has just escaped under my desk. Here we go. I've got my little helping hands here just to make sure that I don't get burned with the heat tool. Heat that up, make sure it's warm before we actually apply it to the embossing powder. The less time it spends on the cardstock, the less warping you will get. So because this is only a lightweight cardstock, I don't want to have the heat on it too long. So I'm going to make sure that this is nice and warm. And just so that you guys can see how this is working, I'm going to pop it underneath here. Doesn't really matter whether you do above or below, but you can actually see that magic happening now. So once you've melted the powder, move on to the next area of your design. Just chase it round. And then I'm just going to come down to the bottom, and once it's finished, we're good to go. And then I'm going to leave that one to dry. So there's a little bit of warping, but I'm not too worried about that. So that's my first piece. We're going to do a bit more stamping on there, but I'm just going to let that dry for a second. Let it cool down, should I say, rather than dry. Now, I'm not going to emboss the inside piece, so we can put the lid on there before I have any major accidents. I do need my black ink again, and I'm also going to bring in some oxide ink as well. So I've actually gone for picked raspberry. So I used my colour chart and had a look which pink fell closest to the design that we were doing. So I had a look in here and looked at which pinks went nicely with the design and landed on picked raspberry. So I'm going to pop that to one side now, and we're going to work on this little piece here. So I am going to bring my stamping press back in, and let's just get a wipe to get rid of that ink, because we've finished with those stamps. And I'm going to do the background layer in pink, and then I'm going to overstamp that one with the black ink. So I'm just using, for ease, just a wet wipe to get some of that pigment ink off my stamps, and those can be put to one side. So let me just make sure we've got these back on the carrier sheet. Finished with that one, and then I've also finished with the ballerinas. We will use some of the stars in a second. I'll come back to those. So I'm actually going to pop my smaller piece in again at that corner, like so. And this time I've got a little tiny, it's almost like, you imagine if you do a squiggle with a pen, it's that kind of idea. So how did I had that facing downwards. So I started in the middle, and literally, you know, if you want to be really choosy with this, which I often am, you know, check with the ruler. This is a 4-inch piece, so the centre's around 2, so I want the middle of this stamp at around 2 inches there. So I'm happy with that. Pop those magnets in place, and again I've got it around about equal distance side to side, and then we're going to use our oxide ink to stamp with. So this is the picked raspberry. I'm going to pick up my stamp, I'm going to ink it up, and it is sort of a distressed image, this. When I first stamped it I thought, oh, it's not working properly, but it is actually, when you look at the stamp, it is slightly distressed, so you can see where it looks as if it's missed a bit, but that is actually the design on the stamp. Okay, so that's the first part, and then I'm going to just clean that stamp off because I want to move it now, and I don't want that pink to transfer until I am actually ready to commit to the position. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it up slightly and position it so that it overlaps a little bit, and then we're going to do a layer at the top as well. So around about there, pick it up and then treat that to the same ink. So we're going to do a couple of layers again. You know the motto, once as good, twice as better. Just to build up that nice colour, because this is going to be in the background when we've stamped over the top of it. Again, I'm just going to clean any surplus ink because I want to reposition it one more time, and I'm going to bring it down to the bottom now. And I think I kept them all, yeah, in the same orientation. So I'm just going to lift this and just overlap again slightly at the bottom. So we're creating that as if we've done it with our pen. And again, you know, if you don't have this kind of stamp, you could create this either with a brush and paint, or a brush and some watercolour, you know, anything like that, just to get this kind of squiggly effect in the background. So we've got one there, and then the final layer of that is going to create our second layer to get that nice depth there. So that's my background piece. So again, we'll just grab that wipe give that a clean up, and then we finish with that one for the time being. Put that back. And then what I'm going to do is on here, we've actually got these gorgeous little ballet slippers. So I'm going to bring those in and we're going to overstamp over the pink. I'm going to go back to that black ink and we're going to pop these right in the centre here over that pink ink. So I just wanted that to create a really nice backdrop, like so. And then I'm going to use that lovely pigment ink again, just to create a nice black silhouette over the top of the background there. And again, I'm just going to give it 2 layers because we're going over that oxide, just to make sure that the pink's covered nicely. Got a couple of layers there, and we're good to go. So again, just clean up the ink as we go along, otherwise I shall end up with my hands or fingers in it and then all sorts of things happen. That one can go back on here, and then we just need to add any extra stamp detail. Okay, so I've just caught that there a little tiny bit with the black, but I'll show you how we can deal with that. Now that ink will still be a little bit wet, so I'm just going to be very careful with that one for the time being. And I did add some little stars in there as well, so we'll do those and we'll bring the stars onto the front, and they're both from this particular set here. So let's have a look. We've got some of the large solid one, and I'm going to bring my block in because these are such little items. I'm going to bring my block in for these. Then I've gone down to the mid-size for the open work, and I'm also going to use the mid-size for the pink as well. Okay, so I'm going to carry on with my platform here just because it's got that little bit of foam in, so that I've got that bit of depression in there. I'm going to pop this back in, but I am actually going to use my block now. I just found I can get better positioning with the block now, just for these little tiny pieces. Okay, so first of all, we're going to use that same pink ink, so the picked raspberry and the oxide there, and I'm going to go straight to the stamp for this one, to the ink pad, sorry, with the stamp. And I want to go here. Now then, the magnet's in the way there, there we go. Okay, and I think I just want the one of that large size. Then I'm going to bring in the smaller one of the solid, and I'm going to stay with that pink ink and bring one of those in as well, like so. And then I want one of those, just make sure that the magnets are not in the way of that stamping block over here. And that's that one done. And then I'm going to bring in that open work one. So this is actually the same size, it's just an outline one, so I'm going to use that one next, and I'm going to come back to that black ink this time, just so that we've got a nice contrast. So again, we're going to go in between at the top there, and we're going to bring one down here. So that's all I need to do there, just remembering that that ink will still be wet for a couple of minutes. We'll give it a blast with the heat tool in a second. And then I'm also going to bring this one back, and I'm just very, very gently going to do 1, 2 and 3, just to add a little bit of interest on that back page as well, that back piece. So that's my stamping sorted. We can put all the lids on, take that out, and then I am just going to grab my heat tool again just to set that ink, because it's a pigment ink, it will stay wet for that little bit longer. So rather than smudging it, just going to set it with the heat tool so that I don't catch it. And I'm going to do the same for the ones on here. I'm going to try not to spend too long over the bit that I've already embossed, because I don't want to remelt any of the embossing powder but just to heat set those pieces so that we don't end up with it smudging all over. Now then, just the little bit that I've got here, I know that I'm working on cream card, but just as a little clean up, I'm just going to add 2 or 3 dots of my little white pen there, and it will just disguise that enough for it not to be so glaringly obvious. So just like you used to use the old whiteout pens, just to sort of tidy it up a little bit. It's not as glaringly obvious that there is actually a mark on it there. So what we're going to do then is we're going to bring that piece back in that we started with, and this one is going to sit on top of here like so. Okay. Now, because this is very, very thin cardstock, I'm not going to use my all-purpose glue, purely because I don't want it to show through here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to bring a scrap of paper in, if I've got some handy. It always makes me laugh when I'm looking for bits of scrap, because you'd think a craft room would have plenty of scrap paper, wouldn't you? I just want to pop that down face down just in case it's got any excess on it. And then I'm going to use my tape runner, and this is actually the dotty one because I'm waiting on delivery of some of the double-sided ones. So I'm just going to use my dotty tape pen there. Take it all the way around the edge and a couple across the centre there. And then this one is going to go, and it just fits about 1/8 of an inch in from the edge there to sit and nestle on top. And like I said, you could actually work straight onto your base piece if your cardstock's a bit heavier than mine. I'm just going to stay away from those stars just for a second. So that's that one. And then when we open this out, we've got the same to work on the background here. So again, I'm just going to put that face down in case there is still any damp ink. I'm going to treat that to the dot runner, and we're going to pop that piece on the back here like so. So again, just that tiny little border all the way around. It just adds another layer of interest. Avoid the black ink again, just in case it's not quite dry. The heat should have set it, and there we go. Okay, so this is now ready to stick into our card. So you can see the Z. If you have this folded together, we want to put glue, and because I've got all the layers now, everything's covered up, I'm going to go with the all-purpose, because if it does show through, it's behind all the matte layers. So I'm actually going to go on the back of the fold back here and cover that piece. And then I'm going to also put glue on the piece of the front that you can see popping out. So this is the folded area here. So I've got glue on the piece that you can still see and glue on this one. And then what we're going to do is position this so that it's pretty much even, and you can see where that wet glue comes into play now. So I'm looking at this border, the top borders, and this one, so that they're all about even, and you just get that time to wiggle it about until you're happy with it, and then we can give it a good press into place. Okay, I'm just going to pop the block on it for a second while we let that set. And then I've just got 1 or 2 bits that I want to do. I'm going to bring in one of my wax colouring crayons. This is actually one of my colour blend crayons. We're going to do a little bit with that in a second. And I've also made some embellishments. So I've used my number dies, and I've had these out before. They are another really old set. This was an old Sarah signature collection from Crafter's Companion, but I go back to these time and time again. And I've used the number 8 for this one for the birthday, and I've cut that again out of quite a nice bright pink. I've also stamped one of those other sentiments, on your special day, and then these were the leftovers. I have not actually used the rest of the stars, but these are the ones that I decorated the inside with. So if we pop that to one side, I've just got my 2 embellishments to pop in place, and we're going to do that with some of the liquid glue, the acrylic glue here. Okay, but just before I do that, the reason I brought the crayon in was these look as if they're sort of floating at the minute, and if you look on this one, just by adding that little bit of crayon, it anchors them as if they've got a purpose. So again, nothing technical. I'm just going to use my crayon straight onto here and just think about whereabouts I want to create the illusion of a little bit of shadow. And again, there's nothing technical. It really is just adding that little bit just to ground them. I haven't even blended it out. I've just left it as it is, like so. And the same for this one. So you've got that little bit of floor space along with a bit of shadow. And it just creates the illusion that there is something there for them to stand on rather than them be floating around in the air. And then finally, I've got my little sentiment here, which I've stamped on the cream card. So this one is going to go on that patterned piece, and I've cut this the same width, that 1 1/4 inches as this one. And this is going to just go from side to side on here. Make sure it's visually straight there. That's good. And then the same with the number 8. I'm going to have that on that side as well. So again, just some of that. I tend to go back to the tacky glue when I'm doing embellishments and things. And this is just going to go at a slight angle. Angles prevent you having to have something straight. You know, it's sort of a good way of ensuring that you don't have to have it perfectly straight. And we are just about there. Okay, so we pop that to one side, pop that to one side, and you can see now where we've got that lovely detail opened out, that lovely double Z. So we've got the background one, and then we've got the foreground one. It all folds flat to go in your envelope. And if I just bring in the one that I'd prepared, you can see that I've added a little bit of extra bling on the front, just with the brown and the pink to link it all together. And then I cut my matte layer just 1/4 inch smaller again with the brown, 1/4 inch smaller with the cream, and just decorated that to link it all in together. So there we go. Absolutely beautiful for my little dancer friend. Hope she likes it. So yeah, that's my tutorial for today. So if you've enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up for me. It does help with the channel. So thank you for watching. I will be back very soon with my next tutorial, and I'll see you all very soon. Bye bye now.